Welcome to Healing with the Diamonds podcast. This show features Larry and Lynne Diamond, along with guests who are passionate about helping families heal together. Through personal stories and powerful conversations, you'll hear real-life experiences and practical tools for reclaiming health. Please note, the information shared in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult your healthcare provider before making changes to your health routine. If you're enjoying Healing with the Diamonds podcast, we'd love your help spreading the word. Leaving a quick review or rating on your favorite podcast platform helps others find us and helps more families start their own healing journey. Thanks so much for listening. Now, here's today's episode.
Welcome to Healing with the Diamonds. I'm Lynne Diamond.
And I'm Larry Diamond.
And today we have Nasha Winters?
You nailed it. Go team. Yes.
I love, we are so thankful for having you on. And we've been on our healing journey for a while. And one of the things that has been helpful for me is through this healing journey, I've become so much more confident in my health. And I used to have a real fear of doctors and just being knowledgeable about where I was health-wise. And I know the information that you provide in your book, and we'll get to that more, has really helped me just be more confident in general. So could you take us back to your own experience with cancer at a young age and just share it with us how that shaped your writing, your career, and the work you do today?
Yeah, I think that a lot of people getting into the work of cancer care in general, it's not like we said, boy, this is a cool career. It's not like I thought, boy, I just want to really work with cancer. That wasn't the plan, right? But I had my own health crisis, my own pain to purpose. And really at, the age of 19, just shy of my 20th birthday, and the official diagnosis came shortly after my 20th birthday in 1991, I was told that I was in end-stage terminal ovarian cancer with only a few months to live. And that I was so far down the rabbit hole that even a single dose of chemotherapy at that time, because my organs had failed, I had a grapefruit-sized tumor on my right ovary, I had peritoneal implants, carcinomatosis, 100% bowel blockage, a full belly full of fluid. I was in trouble, to put it mildly. And so there were no options that were given to me. And it wasn't like I thought I was going to beat this or fight this or survive this. I just wanted to understand it. And so for me, this diagnosis honestly cracked me wide open, and cracked me open not into a place of fear, ironically, but rather one of curiosity, which I kind of think Kaylin just sort of expressed that for herself.
Yeah.
I became my own case study. I dove deep into what drives disease and more importantly, what drives healing. And that has sincerely shaped my entire 3.5 decades on this journey.
And were you already started on a medical path at that time, or is this what you brought you to being a doctor?
That's a great question. Yeah, I was pre-med. I was a sophomore in college. I was pre-med. I was really bound to determine that was my path. I was in, I was a chemistry biology major. And actually this exploded me into a different approach. I moved because I felt honestly failed by standard of care. I had a pretty bad taste in my mouth. And so I took a break from school because I needed to, because I was too sick to continue. But when I did return, I changed my major to psychology and biology. And basically in 1992, at that time, I created a self-constructed major in what was becoming understood as a concept of psychoneuroimmunology. So that's what I got fired up about. I started stumbling across the work of Dr. Robert Ader, of Dr. Candace Pert, of Dr. Bruce Lipton, whose book still wouldn't come out for another 20 years, by the way, from my diagnosis in that time frame. But I started learning a lot about the impact of our thoughts, our traumas on our physiology, as much as the toxins, as much as our genetics, et cetera. And that, for me, because of my own personal, I guess, to be very transparent, trauma history, a very ACE score. If you're familiar with that concept, adverse childhood event score is actually a well-established metric that shows that people under the age of 18 that had certain exposures of certain traumas have a much higher risk of a lot of chronic illnesses, including cancer in their early adulthood. And that it's because it literally rewires our our nervous system, our endocrine system, our immune system. And so those types of early exposure traumas do in fact change our physiologic response, our resilience, and our resistance. And so I got really curious about that. And I had a couple of great professors who really supported my self-constructed major. And I was off and running. I was also very private about my diagnosis. So I wasn't sharing. I had a handful of people in my life, even up for the first almost 20 years of my diagnosis. Only a handful of people really knew what was going on with me because I was very private and very proud. And also, my traumas were still defining me at that time. I felt a lot of shame and embarrassment and victimhood around that. And it took me a long time to really shake free from that and realize that those are things that have actually made me who I am today.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a mic drop. We see everyone, but thank you for sharing all that personal. You went from, like you said, victimhood potentially to empowerment. And Bruce Lee says, another Bruce Lipton,
Right.
the other Bruce,
It does in their own way.
to hell with circumstances, I create opportunities. And but it is real. And I want to be mindful, and anyone out there, that there's a whole universe rooting for you. Really, there's a whole universe that is rooting for you, and the quantum you that is the healed you. And there are other people like Dr. Winters who have kind of jumped timelines to their healing timeline. So that might sound woo woo, but I have a new saying: if it isn't woo woo, is it even true? So that's my perspective. So yeah. So the next question: are you still there? Great. Yeah, we can
Yeah.
see.
I'm in the
So
quantum with you, so we're good.
there's a number of books on cancer that I'm a fan of. Of course, yours, The Metabolic Approach to Cancer. There's also Dr. Jason Fung's The Cancer Code. And there's also a book that I really like because I've always been a reader. And the author of this book is such a great writer. It's like a page turner. It's so much fun. Not that yours isn't, but it's more lyrical in a way. It's called Tripping Over the Truth by Travis Christofferson. And in that, he shares an experiment that when I read it the first time from his book, and it kind of upset me and infuriated me. It's elegant. A seventh grader can understand it, much less anyone that's at a college level, and certainly an oncologist can understand it. And to me, it showed in the 70s that the whole Human Genome Project was kind of a red herring, and that the majority of cancers are because of mitochondrial dysfunction, not genetic anomalies. So I understood that like that reading it, and I'm not an oncologist or an MD. So
Yep.
can you go over that particular experiment and why it's so important?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, Travis has also become a dear friend. He will actually tell you at one point we were early on in both my book actually, I think it was even before my book came out. And shortly after his book came out, I was standing in line at a medical conference to register. And I see him in front of me. And I'm like telling my husband, like, oh my God, I think that's Travis Christofferson. And my husband's like, here I am, that's me, fangirling out on my colleagues in this space. And I walk up to him, I'm like, are you Travis Christofferson? And he kind of looked confused. And I said, and he's like, yes. And I said, I love your book. It is incredible. And he's like, thank you. I think you're the only person who's read it. And that was at that time, it would be another several years before his book was actually being talked about. The world wasn't ready for what he had to share. at the time that book came out, but people like you and I were ready. And you're right, he writes so beautifully, and he's written several more books since then, are just as delicious in their nature. But he also, it's like I tell people, Travis's book, Tripping Over the Truth, is if you took Dr. Siddhartha Mukherjee's book, The Emperor of All Maladies, which is a beast of like almost 1,000-page book, and you take Dr. Tom Seyfried's book, which is an amazing scientific, the metabolic, cancer is a metabolic disease. It's like Travis did the synthesis of both of those books in almost a Cliff's Notes storytelling version. So for those who want to get the big picture of the history of cancer and the evolving understanding of cancer as a metabolic disease, his book is the primer for that. So I just want to give a shout out that you mentioned him, and for your readers to rush off and have a listen or a read. But specific to this study that you're referring to, that has been repeated thousands of times around the globe, which is to say that if this was truly a genetic disease, which we've been telling people it's a genetic disease since 1914, okay, if this was in fact a genetic disease, this very simple, like you said, sort of 7th grade biology project should tell us otherwise, which is in all of our cells, we have these little organs known as organelles. And some of them are, of course, the mitochondria is a major organ, but there's also a big, big organ floating around in those cells called the nuclei. And the nuclei within the cell is the genetic hard drive. It's just like the hard drive in your computer. It holds all the genetic material. Okay. If this was a genetic disease, a simple experiment would have put that to bed and taken from theory to fact, which is if you remove that hard drive, that nuclei of a healthy cell, and you replace the hard drive of a cancer cell, you will turn that cell into a healthy cell. And the opposite is true.
Or into a cancer cell, I think.
Exactly. You take that nuclei out of a cancer cell and replace the nuclei of a healthy cell, it should turn it into a cancer cell. That does not happen. It has never happened. It will never happen, because that is not where the magic lies. The magic lies upstream of that, which is what in the early 90s, another character by the name of Dr. Otto Warburg spoke about, which is the concept that cancer is actually a metabolic mitochondrial disease, and that it's at the level of the mitochondria that when they become distressed or lacking in number or lacking in efficiency and effectiveness, that they then lose the ability to protect the genome. Then and only then would the genes respond. So it's not to say the genes don't play a role, they're just a downstream effect. And so simply put, this mitochondrial metabolic theory, it is like, just to give context, we've literally spent billions, actually over 4 trillion to date, chasing genetic mutations where the real engine is metabolic. And the damaged mitochondria, those little cell energy factories, are at the root. And if we can repair or bypass that dysfunction, we can shift the terrain and change the outcomes, and we can be more protective of that genetic expression. And then one other cool piece here is just a few months ago, not even a few months ago, there was a great paper that came out, I believe in Nature, that suggests that the somatic mutation genetic theory of cancer is finally being put to rest. Right? It's about time.
Could have happened in the late 1970s.
In the 1920s, but then we went metabolic, we went mitochondrial, we went biochemistry until Watson and Crick took credit for finding the helix of the DNA. And then we moved we pendulumed back into the somatic mutation land, and it has not given us the outcomes we had hoped for. And so this is where I'm excited that this paper speaks to the real current paradigm theory is the metabolic mitochondrial theory of cancer. Yeah.
Like, I mentioned earlier how it gave me a lot of hope, and it helped divorce me from a lot of fear around my health, which, in other areas of life, once I realized I was the problem as far as my choices and my habits each day, then that gave me the power to change those. And your book then takes us to the next level. You have the power to change the outcomes around cancer. And I know when you work with your patients and your practitioners, you show them that once you understand more, you can do more. And you talked a little bit about terrain theory. Would you explain that terrain approach for our listeners if they're not familiar with that?
I will. But before I do that, I just want to really acknowledge what you just said, and that, if we really looked at through the lens, when we've spent the last, 101 years or whatever, or 111 years looking through the lens of genetic disease, of just being bad luck and total nothing you can do about it, that just creates a level of like hopelessness. But what you're speaking to and what I've experienced and what I've helped tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of patients experience is this level of hope and this level of agency, which is that you don't know what you don't know until you know. So you may have contributed to a problem, but you are certainly in a position to be the solution. And that's what you're speaking to. So their metabolic mitochondrial approach is so much more hopeful, so much more interactive, offers so much more empowerment and agency to the individual that we don't have to lean so heavily on the institutions. And so I just wanted to feedback that before I talk about the terrain, because I think that's really important for people to understand that this paradigm that we've been living in for over 100 years is finally going to rest, that maybe we are putting ourselves back in our rightful positions in having ability to change our circumstances. So I really love that you brought that up. So really simply, the terrain approach. Think of your body as a garden. This is really simple. Cancer is the weed, but if we focus too much on the weed killers, we don't really change things. We make for more aggressive weeds, or we just decimate the entire garden trying to go after that weed. Instead, when we focus on the soil, we can change the environment in which those weeds are able to grow. So the terrain approach focuses more on building resilient soil, which addresses things like inflammation, immunity, toxins, nutritional deficiencies or excesses, hormones, etc. Basically creating an environment that cancer cannot thrive in. So that's pretty simplistic, but it's pretty realistic.
Absolutely. Another way that we can tend our garden, and ironically, I'm going to talk about fasting. I had the amazing opportunity to work with Dr. Jason Fung and Megan Ramos as a fasting coach, health coach, and researcher for 6 years. And you mentioned Thomas Seyfried before, and we talked about Dr. Jason Fung's The Cancer Code. And I also had the great pleasure to see you in person at the Health Optimizations Summit. It was packed. You got a standing ovation. I could feel the energy in the room. So anyone who sees Dr. Nasha as a speaker, go for it. That'll be worth the ticket. In that live presentation, you were mentioning that there are other countries already, like standard of care, not going, if they're lucky enough to go find a Dr. Winters or a trained practitioner. And I could be getting this wrong, but some countries are offering fasting in addition to other treatments. So let's talk about that, and what most of our listeners might be in North America or the US. But is that true? Just talk about fasting in cancer.
Sure. I mean, my gosh, when I think about a single tool that has the biggest impact, fasting, definitely takes the gold, podium on this one. So it's critical. We've understood it now to reset insulin, to directly starve cancer cells of their fuel, of one of their preferred fuel sources, to protect healthy cells simultaneously during treatment, to enhance or even direct standard of care treatments. It's certainly not a magic bullet, but when it's used wisely and individually tailored, it's one of the most powerful, ancient, and free, so therefore very accessible metabolic therapies that we have. And so I love that you remembered this conversation in Austin, and that in the fall, I took a group of 19 clinicians to Europe to tour hospitals that have standard of care oncology hospitals where they're doing chemo and radiation and surgery and targeted therapies and all the things. But they're also doing mistletoe and hyperthermia and fasting, and other, high dose IV vitamin C. And the craziest part is that's all covered by their medical system. So these were 3 hospitals we visited in Germany and Switzerland. Now, fast forward this summer, I was speaking. I just got back at 6 weeks and 6 conferences and 6 speaking engagements in Europe for the conference season over there. And I spent some time again in Switzerland, and I visited one of 5 clinics. There's 5 clinics for integrative oncology in Zurich alone. And Dr. Hubenthal is the chief medical officer, a standard of care conventional oncologist who uses all these therapies I just talked about, and it's covered by their medical system. Their head nutritionist of all 5 of these centers she was instrumental in getting all 5 of their centers to weave in fasting with all their patients going through chemotherapy. So you will be coached on how to appropriately, safely fast around your chemotherapy and other targeted therapies. That is now standard of care in Switzerland, at least in certain parts of Switzerland. What's really remarkable is just a few months ago, Dr. Walter Longo's book, Fasting Cancer, came out, and I adore that you talk about Jason Fung's book and the Cancer Code, because it's such a powerful resource. But I really love that this Fasting Cancer book came out, because for your listeners to understand, in 1909, Dr. Moreschi, Moreschi, was able to show that fasting alone debulked tumor burden. So that means that basically fasting alone shrunk tumors. Right? We routinely fasted patients in the cancer environment, from medical centers to basic clinics, until the 1960s. It was standard of care, right? And then someone got it in their mind of, don't, these people are already struggling. We're going to make this decision for them, that it's hard and that it's inappropriate and that we don't want to take anything away from them. In fact, we're going to make up a bullshit story that says that you shouldn't lose any weight during cancer. Now, on one level, there's some truth there, because there is this concept of cachexia, a metabolic wasting syndrome, that standard of care and traditional registered dietitians get completely wrong. They honestly do not understand this mission at its core, which is that it's not a calorie deficit issue, and that simply giving more calories will not overcome the issue. It's a metabolic issue, and it's driven by insulin and inflammation. So the worst thing you can ever tell a cancer patient to do is eat whatever they want, just don't lose weight. Most people walking around today are overweight or TOFI, thin on the outside, fat on the inside, which is a well-documented driver. And Dr. Walter Longo's very scientific book, Fasting Cancer, goes into this in great detail. We have really misguided our patients on this level. And here's the irony, is people like Dom D'Agostino and others have actually done research in the treatment and reversal of cachexia. And I will tell you clinically, anecdotally, and with lots of data to back my anecdote, we actually have more success turning around cachexia with fasting than we do with feasting.
No, totally makes sense. I actually wrote a Substack article today of the recording, my first one ever. So Healing with the Diamonds on Substack. And I was talking about the prevalence of what Dr. Phil Maffetone calls overfat, not overweight, but too much fat. And I was pointing out something that I found, not in a cancer setting, but a general healing setting, that when I coach people, I want them to work on their way of eating first, because on the standard modern diet, we also have what I call the standard modern gut. And there's a saying, we are what we eat, but the actual correct statement is we are what we eat and we absorb. So standard modern foods are low in nutrition, but they're also creating an inflamed, dysbiotic gut that can't absorb nutrients. So again, not in a cancer setting, but I want people to become fat adapted, flood their body with nutrients
Right.
then start fasting. But that speaks to TOFI, and people can be both underweight and, of course, overweight on the standard modern diet. But everyone, I feel, in the modern world, almost everyone who doesn't know about this is undernourished.
So good. That's in fact one of the slides I think I shared at that conference was that we are all overfed and undernourished. And you elucidated to several factors of that. A lot of things have changed over the last 150 years, but ultimately that is the case. We've really changed the macros of our food. We've changed the quality of our food. We've changed the processing of our food. And I'll take it one step further to your beautiful statement of we are what we eat and what we absorb. We're actually what we are, what we metabolize. And that goes on all levels, right? Of what we metabolize in our physical, realm, in our physiology, our biochemistry, but even on our emotional realm. What are we metabolizing in our day-to-day information we're taking in our emotional body, our quantum body, or even like what we're metabolizing from social media or from general media? Those are things that even fasting from certain people, places, and things can be very, very, very productive in changing the metabolic processes of your body.
Negative thoughts, fasting from negative thoughts changes our actual body chemistry. Bruce
Yeah.
Lipton.
Yes, absolutely. One of the people asked me, what did you do? What was the one thing you did for your own cancer journey? And there wasn't ever one thing. In fact, I'm still on that journey 34 years later. But one of the critical things I did in the first 2 years was a family fast. And that always lands, "Wait, what?" Like, it catches people. I'm like, I mean what I said. I needed to remove myself by a lot of the people that were contributing to the field of my being that were very toxic, very dangerous, very traumatizing, very neglecting, very abusive in a multitude of ways. And just because I was, just a new adult, finally out on my own, I didn't have to choose to go back into that. And so I really severed. And in 1991, it was a hell of a lot easier to hide from people than it is today. It was a hell of a lot easier to be like unreachable than it is today. And so I actually think that was also very much part of my process because I do want to say this thing. If I had had the same diagnosis today that I did in 1991, I'm not sure if I'd survive it. And here's why. In 1991, there was not a Dr. Google. There were not dozens of podcasts and millions of Facebook forums and lots of influencers and lots of books and resources out there. I had to go inward. I was the expert on myself. I had to listen to my own beating rhythms. I had to really get very clear, very still, very present, very observant, and very real. And so I think in the world today, there are so many distractions and so many people are looking and reaching for things outside of them to fix this that you might get lucky, but most people won't until they get very, very still and very, very inward in their healing process.
Wow. And you just described personal knowing or personal gnosis,
Mm,
and also intuition. That's incredible and reminds me of something I've seen called a medicine woman's prayer. And I don't want to offend anyone. I don't know if it's actual medicine woman or prayer or not, but I will not heal you because you are not broken, but I will walk beside you as you remember your own light. So that sounded very reminiscent of that.
got goosies. That's absolutely beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think we've touched on some of these things, but one of the reasons we started healing with the diamonds is because we were able to find a way to heal ourselves without buying a program, with buying an exercise machine, without buying certain products.
Without any influencers.
Yeah,
There's some. Yeah, there were, but grounded in ancestral wisdom. Mark
Yeah.
Sifton, just the primal, forever common sense to me. Real food, get some sun.
And I think in the times we are now, with all the influencers out there, with everyone trying to push a product, there's this thought that, oh, well, I need to buy this product. I need to do this program. And if I can't afford it, if I can't access it, then I'm not going to be successful. But that's not true. We know that's not true, and we want to get that information out to everyone. That it's accessible. We did it. We continue. We helped our daughter. We helped our family. So from a cancer perspective, or
Knowledge is really the product, and Dr. Nasha has wonderful knowledge and safe knowledge.
Right.
A guide is the product.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. So, what would you say to our listeners if they're concerned about their terrain, if they're concerned because they have family members going through this? Could you suggest to them to do on a daily basis or do in their lives that maybe we haven't touched on yet?
Well, first, I also want to acknowledge just some of the people you mentioned from the ancestral health space. As someone who's been on my own cancer healing journey for over almost 34 years and helped so many others, I have seen more change in the last decade than I've seen in the collective 24 years leading up to this last decade. And the biggest changes, in my opinion, were not breakthroughs in big academic institutions and big world-class cancer centers. The biggest changes, the biggest ahas, the levers we were able to leverage and pull on to change our outcomes has actually come from the primal health community, the ancestral health community. And so I was shocked. I'm a naturopathic physician by training, and I'm only now seeing other naturopathic colleagues of mine attending or speaking at these conferences. Just shocking to me that this is so foundational to our healing. And so to be witness to so many of these people saying, we have gotten so far from our genetic origin, from our ancestral origin. And yes, we can appreciate the modern times, that we also need to be very, very, very clear that it's also comes with a price. This finding the way of bringing them together has been a really fun.
Yeah.
I feel like it's brought a lot of fun and curiosity and enthusiasm into my practice in the last 10 years and that of those I serve, because we can really take people back to what we've forgotten. So
I like that.
and so what you're asking, it's like, what can all of us access on a day-to-day basis? Your listeners, you probably draw in a clientele that's more like us, right? That's already aware. But let's say you have someone who's hearing this, they just stumble upon this, they've never heard this. People need to know, in the United States at least, Americans spend less than 15 minutes outdoors every day. We've gone from 20% of people living in urban environments to 80% of people living in urban environments. Most people have zero idea where their food comes from. We have normalized highly processed foods. We have normalized going from 5 pounds of sugar per person per year in the 80s to 150 pounds of sugar per person per year today. We have normalized that we are just walking around robots completely attached and addicted to our devices. We have completely normalized our longevity medicine, which is all about pumping ourselves up with exogenous hormones and fillers and whatnot to make the container look better, but it has extreme impact on the actual health span on the inside. And so I want folks to get back to the basics. Like, do you know when the moon is full and when the moon is waxing or waning? Do you know what time the sun rises or sets? Are you spending, just a few generations ago, we spent an average of 4 hours a day outdoors, and that was active, not just sitting there, right? We were chopping wood and carrying water. We were getting tons of sunscreen. Our soap was not a detergent, it was animal fat based. And we were able to utilize, like, we basically only bathed once a week and really only pits and parts.
Yeah.
We weren't detergenting away the most critical resource, the sun, but to actually completely send all the signaling pathways. We weren't being exposed to anything but candlelight and firelight and lantern light for all of human creation until only just over 100 years ago. All of these things have had such impact. And so people can start to be like, my house looks like the red light district after sunset. I'll tell you now, like, we all look great in red light, so I recommend that for everybody. Really shifts the gears of our, like, getting our body set. My husband and I get up in the morning before that sun rises, and we do our own daily practice. We watch that sunrise every morning, and when possible, we watch the sunset every evening. It is so part of our journey. We move our bodies. We get our 8 to 10,000 steps minimum in per day. We focus on our breath. We focus on things. All of those things I just described to you are free. All of them. Right? When I was in Zurich this summer, like I took a group of doctors and we'd get up in the morning and we go jump in Lake San Moritz, right? Which was 11 degrees Celsius, which is about 50 degrees, which was far warmer. Last year it was 32 degrees. So, and they're all like wimping out, like, this is warm, like balmy. To get up and do that every morning, watch these doctors having their own ahas, their own literal awakenings. And this is at a metabolic conference. So they're so focused in lab or at the bench that they forget about the bedside and just the reality of applying this in their day to day. So I want patients to like go back to the fundamentals, like just make sure you know exactly where your food, your water, your light is coming from and alter that. There's not I don't care how good the treatment is, whether it's chemotherapy or label drugs or, a high dose IV vitamin C or mistletoe, if it's landing in an environment that is confused, that is overwhelmed, that is overburdened and is completely out of sync and out of rhythm, those amazing therapies fall flat.
So, wow. So, yeah, we've both, I'm a primal certified health coach, one of the first ones in the world. We were both Friday success stories when there was Mark's Daily Apple. But I think to tie this all together, first, for sure, as you're answering this, I want people to get the title of your book. I know you don't want the prevalence of cancer, obviously, but I'm glad that Planet Gaia has you. But what I was getting, really what you were talking about in the old sense of the word, however it originated in Greek, or the word diet.
Yeah.
Like our diet is not only our food, but you were talking about our light diet,
Yes.
our family members we choose to spend time with, diet. And diet, I think, really means way of daily habits, basically. So I'm just restating what you stated. But what's interesting to me, because I've been fascinated by mitochondria, and almost everything that you mention that is a pro health kind of cancer preventive or cancer healing also has been shown to really help mitochondrial health. Mitochondria like cold shock, they like heat shock, they like real food, they like the sun, they like nourishing family relationships. Minding or mitochondria? How can people get in contact with you? And last thoughts.
I love it. Well, I love that you sort of summarized that discussion because I think that's really accurate. When people think about, so just one more thought on mitochondria, and then we'll move into that. So when I think about mitochondria, we were all taught, right, that it just creates ATP. Well, first of all, just is silly because that's a big deal. You don't live without your ATP. So that's an important job. But there's three main jobs of the mitochondria. Number one is it's the receiver. It's the collector of all the information it's taking in, putting in, on, and around you from people, places, and things. So that's it. It's the original, like, I'm taking it all in and evaluating. Second job, that evaluation is the translation. What does all that data input mean? Right? That's the second job. It's like, okay, there's a lot here. What I'm going to make sense of this. I'm going to organize this. I'm going to categorize this. I'm going to translate this. Now, if you've got something jammed up in the workways there, you can imagine that the translation, sometimes our Google Translates don't really add up, right? So there are ways around that. The third biggest job is it's a signaling agent. It communicates, it takes all that information, makes sense of it, and then tells the surrounding organelles, surrounding cells, surrounding tissues, organs, and structure, and psyche what to do with that information. So simply put, garbage in, garbage out,
Right.
nourishing things in, nourishing things out. we are so far from even our awareness of everything we're being exposed to in, on, and around us, including people, places, and things, that we have completely lost touch with the fact that the mitochondria historically handle upwards of 60,000 hits a day, historically, and is able to, like Wonder Woman, deal with it. Boom, boom, boom. I got it. I got it. I got it. Those poor little mitochondria are exhausted today. And our aging, our longevity is based on the health and wealth of our mitochondria. And so we now have diseases that were considered diseases of the aged happening in younger and younger people. And we're all looking for the genetic rationale behind it. And everyone's forgetting about the fundamental fountain of youth, which is the mitochondria. So we have very old cells now, even in the very youngest of us. And so I just wanted to reiterate that to folks, that you can, like, we just had some testing done to like take a look at our biologic age, our, our health span versus lifespan age. And you can literally make yourself younger by choosing different things to input to your mitochondria. And you can make yourself older in the same breath. So I just wanted folks to just take that in and realize that you are far more powerful than you've been led to believe in this arena. And it does not take expensive, sexy toys and devices and pills and potions to do it. Because if you ignore the fundamentals, those pills and potions won't even do anything, right? So that's important. But as far as how to find me, I mean, my book, The Metabolic Approach to Cancer, is a really good starting point. In fact, my husband, it's such a pet peeve for him. He wishes it had been called The Metabolic Approach to Life, because I think cancer may deter people. And I love, Kim, you even spoke to that. Like, you read it and you weren't dealing with cancer.
Right.
So that's where I want people to realize, like, don't let the word cancer scare you. This is like, maybe think about cancer prevention, or if you're already in the journey of cancer or on the other side of that journey, you will find many aha moments for yourself in this book. Right. My website, drnasha.com, drnasha.com, has of podcasts and interviews and summits and all, blogs and things I've written for or been interviewed for. You can go down rabbit holes of free data dump that you could possibly imagine. You could also, and if you're curious and you want to be part of the solution, we have our nonprofit arm, which is our research and development side of things, to help take metabolic health to the next level, and metabolic oncology in particular. But we also use our nonprofit to help create grants for patients undergoing a cancer diagnosis looking for a practitioner schooled in this approach. So if you want to contribute to that, if you need access to that, mtih.org is our nonprofit arm. That stands for Metabolic Terrain Institute of Health. And then if you're also a curious consumer and you want to learn more, Metabolic Regen, so metabolicregen.com, that's our university, right? That's where, if you're a clinician, we have courses for you, allied health professional courses for you, advocates courses for you, and soon to be do-it-yourself kind of public access coming. But our tagline there is educate to regenerate, because an empowered patient is a very hard to kill patient. And an empowered doctor is a very hard to deter or buy out doctor. So we've done a lot of work in that area. The one thing I really am hoping I can, if this comes out ahead of time, we are hosting a conference in Tucson, Arizona in October. Metabolic Health Day is the 10th of October, and we're putting together an event around that. And so the 10th and 11th of October, join us at Los Ventana in Tucson, Arizona, both live or virtually. We have both options. So wherever you are in the world, you can be there, and it will be recorded as well. And so this is where we're bringing in the best of regenerative metabolic health experts with the best of metabolic, regenerative, and soil remediation experts, Regen Ag World, with the best of environmental medicine, because you can't heal in a toxic environment. And we're bringing all the people and all the solutions drivers together under one roof at one time, instead of all of them being siloed at different conferences, which is how it's always happened. And so I'm super excited about that. There are so many amazing folks. So people could go check out who our keynotes are. Each of them could fill a stadium on their own. But I'm excited about, we'll have over 30 other speakers and massive vendors that are supporting a healthier lifestyle, a healthier mitochondria, frankly.
Well, we have connection with Tucson, and this will come out before then, so we'll be able to get the word out.
My mom lives there. We love Tucson. We love it. We know a great Airbnb. Contact us. It's like 2 acres. It's got tortoises and goats. And
please share with me. I love it.
I'll share it.
Yeah.
You get first crack at.
Get first tips.
Is Fred Provenza going to be there? I'm so excited about region. And I was telling Kaylin that I think that you were looking into raising the best quality food for cancer patients. And it's interesting to me that mitochondria only come from our moms. And if we can be a little flowery, Gaia, mitochondria, our moms, Gaia food. And I do personally believe, not asking anyone to agree, that humanity and the planet has to heal together.
Yes.
It just won't work any other way.
When you see the ethos behind this conference, when you really dive into my book, when you look at everything that drnasha.com represents, everything that MTIH represents, we're looking at building a hospital. We're raising funds to build a 250,000 square foot, 150 bed hospital, residential integrative oncology hospital and research institute on a 1,200 acre organic regenerative farm, right?
That's amazing.
We recognize how these go together, and that's happening southeast of Tucson. So we're taking people.
Wow.
People want to join us to go walk the land on the Sunday after. We would love to have you come because this
We
is a
might be.
I need another trip to Tucson.
Yeah, I think
There
we
you
might.
go. Looks like you're coming to Tucson, guys. But these are the things that there's so many ships rising together right now from the region ag world, the region health world, the environmental medicine world, and the policy making world that are coming together in this really exquisite way that I'm feeling very hopeful for the first time in a very, very long time. And so I hope that that lands with you and your listeners, that we actually can be part of the solution. Dire as it may seem or feel on any given day, given the polarity of the world we live in today, please know there are so many dedicated humans that are, and beings out there that are changing things, hopefully for the better for all of humanity.
Thank you so much. I think that's a really wonderful way to wrap up that there is hope. And and that's what I got from you to begin with. So like onward. Very exciting. Thank you so much for being here. Did you want to?
No, thank you. Just gratitude.
Thank you both. And I'm excited for all of your listeners to have access to all of your wisdom.
Thank you.
Wow. We really appreciate that.